Sagawa's 1981 murder, dismemberment, and consumption of Renée Hartevelt was the realization of a lifelong ambition. Japan native Sagawa was in Paris for his comparative literature studies when he committed the crime. Almost instantly, he was taken into custody and committed to a mental institution. However, after being extradited to Japan, he checked himself out of a different psychiatric hospital and has been free ever since. Since then, he has been able to support himself financially thanks to his criminal activities. He has even achieved a measure of fame in Japan. He has made multiple television appearances and written manga novels in which Hartevelt is murdered and eaten. In fact, he's been featured in reenactments of softcore porn films in which he bites human actors. Moreover, he has been chillingly unrepentant throughout his entire life. He talks about his wrongdoing as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. And he intends to repeat the process. The date of Issei Sagawa's birth is April 26, 1949. Furthermore, he has always been preoccupied with the idea of eating human flesh and has experienced strong cannibalistic impulses. Favorite memory: uncle dressed as monster lowered him and his brother into a stew pot. He was particularly fond of the Hansel and Gretel story because it featured a child being eaten by a wolf. Even as early as first grade, he says he would look at his classmates' legs and think, that looks delicious. His fascination with cannibalism, which he likens to what most people would call sexual desire, he attributes to the media's portrayal of Western women like Grace Kelly. When most men fantasized about sleeping with these stunning ladies, Sagawa pictured himself devouring them. According to Issei Sagawa, the motivations behind his cannibalistic tendencies are incomprehensible to anyone who doesn't experience the same things he does. Just a fetish, he concluded. If a regular guy had a crush on a girl, he'd want to hang out with her as much as possible, get intimate with her, and maybe even give her a kiss and a sniff. Eating is, essentially, a continuation of that for me. I just don't understand why everyone has this innate desire to devour, or consume, other people. But he insists that he only ever intended to gnaw on their flesh, and never kill them. He wrote about his short, thin stature and pencil-like legs in his best-selling novel, In the Fog. And he thought that his short stature, he was only about 49 inches tall, made him too repulsive to attract the kind of physical intimacy that would have moderated his desires. Sagawa tried to seek help from a psychiatrist when he was 15 years old, but the experience only made him more reclusive. After 32 years of suppressing his desires, he gave in to them in 1981. Issei Sagawa went to the Sorbonne, a public research university in Paris, to pursue a degree in literature. He claimed his cannibalistic tendencies took over once he arrived at his destination. Almost nightly, he would bring a prostitute home and try to shoot her from behind, as he described in the Fog. It wasn't so much that I wanted to eat them as I was consumed by the idea that I had to perform this ritual of killing a girl no matter what. He settled on the ideal target in the end. In Sagawa's Sorbonne class was Dutch student Renée Hartevelt. Sagawa became friends with her and began inviting her over for dinner on occasion. He eventually won her confidence. Before he finally succeeded in murdering her, he attempted to kill her. Once, when she turned her back, the gun accidentally discharged. This would have been a sign for most people to give up, but for Sagawa it only drove him deeper into his obsession. He said, "It made me hysterical, and I knew I had to kill her." His action occurred the following evening. This time the bullet went straight through Hartevelt's head. Sagawa was initially saddened but quickly felt exhilaration. He reflected, "I considered dialing 911. And then I told myself, hey, don't be an idiot. After 32 years of hoping and planning, your dream has come true." After he had finished killing her, he raped her body and began to dismember it. "The first thing I did was slash open her buttock. Regardless of how deeply I cut, I could only make out the fat layer beneath the skin. It was disguised as corn and it took some digging before Sagawa found the beef. Immediately upon laying eyes on the meat, I ripped off a piece and stuffed it in my mouth. For me, that was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The only thing he regretted, he said, was not eating her while she was still alive. What I really wanted, he confessed, was to gorge himself on her fresh flesh. Even though no one believes me, I wanted to eat her, not necessarily kill her. Sagawa buried the remains of Harteveldt's body 2 days after she murdered her. He packed her legs, torso, and head into 2 suitcases and called a cab, having already eaten or frozen most of her pelvic region. The cab let him off in a park called Bois de Boulogne, which contained a quiet lake. The suitcases were dripping blood, and several witnesses alerted the French police, foiling his plan to drop them in the pit. Sagawa's confession to the police was straightforward: I killed her to eat her flesh. Issei Sagawa sat in a French jail for 2 years before his trial. Finally brought to trial, French judge Jean-Louis Bruguière ruled that he was legally insane and therefore incompetent to stand trial, dismissed all charges against him, and ordered that he be committed to a mental institution indefinitely. After that, he was sent back to Japan to spend the rest of his life in a psychiatric institution there. He didn't, though. France no longer had any use for the court documents because the charges against the defendant had been dropped, so they were not made available to the Japanese government. As a result, the Japanese were powerless to prosecute Issei Sagawa and were forced to release him. Meanwhile, Issei Sagawa discharged himself from Tokyo's Matsuzawa Psychiatric Hospital on August 12, 1986. Since then, he's been able to live independently. Issei Sagawa is now a free man, and he is able to go wherever he pleases in his home city of Tokyo. It's terrifying to think that the possibility of spending the rest of his life in jail hasn't stopped him from giving in to his baser instincts. It's around June that women start wearing less clothing and bearing more skin, and that's when the craving for human flesh becomes unbearable, he said. In the present tense, on my way to the train station this morning, I saw a girl who had a really nice derriere. Looking at such things makes me want to eat again before I die. What he meant was, I can't bear the thought of leaving this life without ever tasting that derriere that I saw this morning, or her thighs, he explained. When I die, I want to be able to say, at least I was satisfied, which is why I want to eat them again while I'm still alive. What's more, he's already thought out his strategy for achieving his goal. Sukiyaki or shabu shabu, lightly boiled thin slices, is the way to go, in my opinion, to fully appreciate the meat's inherent flavor. But Sagawa has avoided cannibalism for the time being. But he is still making money off of his criminal activity. He was successful on the lecture circuit talking about his criminal urges and writing restaurant reviews for the Japanese magazine Spa. 20 books under his name have been released so far. His newest book, Extremely Intimate Fantasies of Beautiful Girls, is illustrated with works by both the author and other well-known artists. He hoped that, at the very least, people who read it will stop thinking of me as a monster. In order to fully appreciate the meat's inherent flavor, I recommend cooking it in either the sukiyaki or shabu shabu style, lightly boiled thin slices. However, Sagawa has avoided cannibalism for the time being. Yet he continues to profit from his wrongdoing. After finding success lecturing about his criminal inclinations, he reviewed restaurants for the Japanese magazine Spa. 20 books under his name have been released so far. Recent works include Extremely Intimate Fantasies of Beautiful Girls, which features illustrations by both the author and other well-known artists. The author hoped that the book would dispel his readers' monster perceptions.